Welcome, everyone. I am Shannon McCracken with the Nonprofit Alliance. We're glad you're here today. And let me start by also saying I hope you are staying healthy in these troubling times. And we appreciate you carving out time for a little bit of normalcy. And we appreciate our speakers for bringing that to us today as well. This is our first in a monthly webinar series hosted for and by our Catholic Development Council here at the Nonprofit Alliance. And so I'd like to welcome Sheila McGirl, CFRE, Senior Director of Institutional Advancement with Central Association of the Miraculous Medal, and Jim Lawrence, Executive VP with Lawrence Direct. Let me hit on just a couple quick housekeeping things. Your lines are muted so that we can avoid background noise. Please use your chat box or your Q&A box to submit any questions and comments throughout, and we will make sure that Sheila and Jim are able to see and respond to those as time allows. We are recording this webinar, and we will make the recording available to you afterwards. There will also be a series of actually 9 quick polls that we take throughout, so you will see those pop up on your screen and will be able to participate. Jim and Sheila, with that, may I turn it over to you?
Absolutely, Shannon. Thank you so much for putting this together, and thank you all for joining. And as Shannon said, I know everyone's having a crazy time right now, so my prayers and thoughts are with all of you. And hopefully this type of thing, webinars, are a good use of our time. So I'm going to let Sheila talk a little bit about the Central Association of the Miraculous Medal to get us started.
Well, good morning, everyone. And I likewise am very happy to be with you today to share some of the things that we've learned and to also join with you in prayer over this pandemic that we're going through. In fact, at our Miraculous Medal Novena Shrine, at our Miraculous Medal Shrine, we live streamed the novena this morning, and I kept all the participants of this webinar in prayer and all of our missions as well. So to tell you a little bit about the Central Association of the Miraculous Medal, we were founded in 1915 by a Vincentian priest named Father Joseph Skelly. And Father Joseph Skelly's mission was very much the same as it is today. He shared a devotion for the Blessed Mother under her title of Our Lady of the Miraculous Medal. And so that started in 1915 when he established the Central Association of the Miraculous Medal. And his main mission was to fundraise to build a seminary in North Jersey for the Vincentian fathers and brothers. And he accomplished this pretty large mission in 2 years. And how did he do it? He did it through direct mail all those years ago. Father Skelly wrote some handwritten letters, sent them out to people that he thought would support him in his mission. He enclosed a blessed miraculous medal in each and every one of those envelopes and accomplished that mission in 2 years. And so in 1927, in gratitude of Our Lady's guidance and support during his mission, he built the Miraculous Medal Shrine. And in 1930, he began the Miraculous Medal Novena that since then has grown and become a part of parishes and communities all over the world. And very much the same, the mission is very much the same today, only we've expanded it somewhat. And we support the Vincentians of the Eastern Province up and down the East Coast. We support their apostolic ministries, but in our house we say all things begin and end with Our Lady. So through devotion to Our Lady, the Miraculous Medal, we're able to carry on that mission, support the poor and marginalized, and keep Mary's message alive. So that's what we're all about at CAM.
Thanks, Sheila. And Lawrence Direct has been in business for 31 years, and we supply nonprofit fundraising services to nonprofits, in particular Catholic nonprofits, and we do that mostly through direct mail and email. And so part of the background of why we're here today is that Sheila and I work closely together, looking at the mail calendar and seeing how we can deliver improvement. So all the tests you're going to see today are split in a 50-50 random nth manner, which means like segments are split randomly in half, and one half of the file gets one test version, the other half gets the other test version. So it's not weighted in any particular direction. All the projects we're talking about today were from 2019. Typically, when we make our final call on tests, we like to have at least 60 days, but preferably 90. In this case, all these projects are out further than 90 days, so these results are set in stone. I also think it's important to look at all the metrics that go into analyzing response, but we often defer to ROI, which I think kind of takes into account a lot of the different metrics like percent response, average gift, etc. So typically we're looking at ROI as the final determinant of our winner. And we're going to talk about 3 different types of tests today. You people on the audience may have some different categories of tests you do, but our 3 broad categories of tests that we're discussing today are Astring Test, outer envelope test, and then test of the interior components. So I'll jump right into the Astring test, and I want to just give a quick little bit of background on this. I think it's important for every organization to test which Astring works for them. I think it's a test you should revisit, and I think you should maybe use different Astrings for different types of mailing. Sheila and I know that the Central Association Miraculous Medal has a database that some people have been on that database for many, many years. So their giving history is certainly unlike a newer organization in that people's fortunes have changed. So their giving patterns change over time. And we feel it's important to try to make sure we're meeting the donors where they are at the moment they receive the mail piece. So we put a lot of focus on doing Astring testing. And one of our, typically in Lawrence Direct experience, we see highest previous contribution being the basis for Astrings as the winner. And with CAM, we decided to test MRC because, again, the file has been around for a long time. So a lot of people have given gifts for many, many years. So we're trying to see, hey, if we match their most recent gift, what success would we have? As you can see here, the Astrings are built off the same multipliers. So the first position is MRC, the exact amount. And the second amount is MRC or HPC times 1.5. And then the third amount is times 2. So the control had the MRC and the test had HPC. So Sheila, do you have anything you want to add to this?
No, just that, especially at CAM, like Jim said, we have a lot of older donors on the file. So it's very important for us to make sure that we get this right. And we're currently testing average gift as well, but we don't have the results for that to contribute right now. But this one is very important to us.
Yeah, so the first thing I want to ask everyone, based on your experience, what do you think will win? Do you think the control, which was MRC, most recent contribution, or do you think the test of HPC will win? And obviously, you can base this off your past experience. You can just take a random guess, but I'm curious to see what people think, and then we'll take a look at the actual results. Shannon, do you know how long it should take for those poll results to come in? Should I proceed?
Let's give it, we have a good number of folks who have voted. Let's give it another 10 seconds and then we'll end it.
Okay, yeah, great, that's perfect. Ideally, we'll see the vote and then we'll do the actual results. That'll make it fun. Mm-hmm. Just a quick background on testing. I'm sure everyone on the phone has their own ideas about testing and we all know the importance of it, but when we sit around in creative meetings and when we're talking with Sheila and our clients and strategizing what we think we should test, of course we have opinions, and those opinions are based on gut feelings, they're based on experience. But what we really try to make sure we do is we let the donor response data tell us what works. It's not what we think, it's not what the person we talked to last Tuesday thinks, it's really what the donors think. They're the ones who are going to decide what wins. Okay, so great, we have the results of the poll. We've got 60% of the people thinking the control will win, and 40% thinking the test. So thank you all for voting. So I'm just going to close that out and we're going to take a look at the results. So the control MRC Astring, as you can see, the quantities of people we mailed are similar, very close, obviously mailed on the exact same day. The only difference in this case was the Astring. Everything else about the two versions was exactly the same. And in this case, because it's an Astring test, the cost is the same. There's no additional cost version 1 to version 2. So the total costs are very similar because the same quantity. The percent response for the two is very similar. MRC, now, sorry, this one is exactly the same. And yes, we checked the data. So we had the two versions come in with the exact same percent response. The difference in this case was in average gift. And the most recent came in with $26.18. So Sheila, I'll turn that over to you if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so, this was a very, very interesting result. Like Jim said, we both double checked the data to make sure that it was correct, and we had exactly the same response on this one. But the most recent contribution, I think, Jim, you'll agree that from what we've learned from our donor database with our interaction with them, that is probably where I would have figured they'd come in, most recent contribution, because like you said, when their life situation changes, their giving changes. So if they gave us a high contribution, it's very difficult to go with that going forward because we don't know what their current situation is. So MRC1 in this case.
Yeah, and I will say that, again, we all have our own little polls and bets on which way these things will turn out. This one, to me, is a little contrary because I thought that the MRC might drive higher percent response. Essentially, people were more comfortable with that amount, so I figured we'd get higher percent response there. And again, if you asked me before this test, I would have said a lower average gift. So it turned out differently than what I thought, which is why we test. We don't let our assumptions get in the way, and we let the donor data drive these things. So, pardon me. And the other thing is, of course, you're seeing there's a couple $1,000s extra raised from that most recent contribution, Astring. The goal is to learn this data, but then apply it going forward. Because then as you apply that information and going forward, you raise countless more net dollars by applying these little pieces of data and the results of these Astrings, these tests forward. So as Sheila said, MRC1. So what do? Well, we thought this is very important, so we ran 2 tests on it. And I encourage you all to back test these things occasionally. Sometimes we'll run 2 or 3 consecutive tests of the exact same thing to really get a high confidence level in the response, and I encourage you all to do that. So in this case, our next Astring test was the exact same thing on a different package. So this test was set up the exact same way, and we ran it again. So I'm going to ask you to tell us what you think happens the second time. And again, I'm sure there's a lot of people in the room who've done these type of things. Some tests we repeat and the results are virtually identical. Some times we get totally different results. And so obviously we try to repeat them and back test them so that we get a confidence level over time.
And so it's important to repeat the test, but it's also, when you're dealing with marketing tests, any kind of variables and different factors, random factors can creep in and skew your result a little bit. So I would also add, Jim, that we should emphasize the importance of people testing the right amount of mail, making sure that you have a good quantity that you're testing so that you can, skew that result as accurately as possible.
Yeah, absolutely, Sheila. In this case, the file size, I think we see this quantity issue a lot of times when we're doing prospect mail tests and acquisition, where, that spend is so important. And so you try to carefully test. I think typically the minimum amount for a test to be statistically valid would be AB of 5,000 names apiece. But the higher the quantity is, I think the better confidence you have in the response. So that's why we're doing, for these house file splits, we're doing roughly a 50-50 split, and that gives us a pretty high confidence.
And for us, that's about 40 to 50,000 that we mail out at any given time. We do that AB head-to-head 50-50 test. Look, some results came in, Jim.
Yep, so the audience has spoken, and we had a slight shift in that we had 3 people going with the control, or 75% of the people going with the control, and 25% going with the test. So the result shifted a little bit. So let's see what the actual result is.
So if you look at the results, you'll see the most recent contribution had a much higher response rate, but it also had the lower average gift, and an overall return on investment was higher at 11 cents. So it's somewhat different result than the previous one. And it speaks to why key tests should be repeated again, you know, piggybacking on what Jim said. So you can discern the information, make the best decisions for your campaigns.
Yeah, absolutely. This test, this one turned out like I would expect it to turn out, in that there was a much higher percent response. You know, I think anything approaching 1% response increase is a big number from the MRC test group. And then that average gift was down a little bit, but the increase in response offset that lower average gift. So MRC is the winner. And so as you can imagine, we switched to that being the control. And that's something Sheila indicated. We're going to test average gift as another way of looking at the Astring. But for the time being, after these tests came in, we said, hey, you know, MRC it is. I think we've already
This next test was very important to me anyway, because as Jim and I were discussing, our CAM membership package, we have a fixed rate for our membership. So we wanted to test if we could get donors to give an additional amount to their membership donation. So that's where this test came from.
Yes, exactly as Sheila said, there's a fixed amount for the membership for the year. And typically, we had asked the donors, hey, please give your membership gift. And then we asked them in a open-ended way to give an additional gift. We said, hey, if now would be a time for an additional gift, please give an additional gift. But there was no amount populated. So this test, we tested that control of a fixed ask versus a test which had that fixed ask, and I'll show you what it looks like, versus a 3-position variable ask. So this is the control reply. Okay, you've got your series of yes responses up top, and then you have your annual membership gift of $30 there. And so that, again, that's a fixed amount for the membership for the year. And then we have the additional gift. And as you can see, we're asking the donors to fill them in themselves. And we're not trying to guide them or steer them in any way. So that's the control. And then the test version, you'll see, is very similar, except that second line for additional gift, we now have populated these suggestions for 3 additional amounts, and they're based on their previous giving history. Okay, so now that we've seen how the test is structured, I'd like to ask the audience to vote on this one. What do you think will win, that control with a fixed ask, or the test with a fixed ask plus those 3 additional ask amounts based on variable asks? And I think a lot of nonprofits in the Catholic space and in other segments use fixed amounts for their membership. So I think this is a really good test that a lot of people can take back and try on their own house files. But it was something we were really anxious to do, because you do want to try to get an additional amount from your membership if you can.
Right. Wow.
Okay. Overwhelming here. The audience 100% thinks the test will win.
So the winner is the variable ask string. This was an interesting one for us. I think you'll agree, Jim. The variable ask string, the 3-position variable, revealed a slight suppression on the percent response.
Mm-hmm.
The average gift was increased by $2.25. So there was no cost difference with regard to this particular test. So the 3-position variable ask string wins.
Yeah, and as you may have noticed, the audience may have noticed the pink or the magenta color on that reply. That is not how that package is going to actually mail. That indicates laser copy. And because these changes are in laser copy, there's no cost difference for this test. So you've got the equal cost. And then exactly as Sheila said, for that additional gift amount, it suppressed response a little bit, but it did bring up that average gift, which is what we were looking to do. We're looking to get that additional gift from those people in addition to their membership. And so that test won. It had an ROI of 542 versus 524. So the audience, you were correct on this one all the way. And I thought Shannon, if it's okay with you, if the audience has any questions now, we are done with the Astring test. So if anyone wants to ask any questions on these Astring tests or any other Astring tests in general, if that works with you, Shannon, we can do that now. And if that's not conducive, we can do it at the end.
That is fine. There's nothing in the chat box just yet. So.
Okay. Well, if you guys have any questions about these Astring tests or any others, submit your questions and we'll be happy to take them. We'll move on to the next big category of tests, and that is outer envelopes. Obviously, what appears on the outer envelope goes a long way towards dictating whether or not it gets opened, how people react to that package. So it's very important to test the outer envelope.
It's a great place to test, and you know, when you get right down to it, there's different things, several different things that you can test. So we test color, paper stock, finish, teasers, postage appearance, etc. And we try to look at what production values will drive our performance. So I find these tests very interesting, and I'm not always right in my own guesses.
Yeah, and this is one where the Central Association Miraculous Medal is a great client to have for many reasons. One of them is because they have this beautiful shrine, and there's these beautiful images that we can use in our direct mail. And so we often want to use those. And you know, sometimes the best way to have an image appear visually speaking is by having it in full color or 4-color, but that's expensive. And so one of the packages that Sheila and I discussed was their package called The Year with Mary that typically had this beautiful outer envelope, and I'll show it to you. I think it's a very attractive outer envelope, and in particular, the gorgeous 4-color photo of the Mary statue there at the shrine. You know, it's visually distinct, and it jumps out in the mailbox. And our question was, hey, does the extra cost we have to pay for color drive performance? And so we developed a test version of this outer envelope. And as you see, it's white instead of yellow, and it's 2-color instead of full color. I'm actually going to toggle back. You see the teaser is the main teaser. The primary teaser is light blue. The secondary teaser is red. And that's the same on both versions. What's really different is the background color of the envelope and the fact that that photo of Mary is now 2-color or duotone. And so that made this envelope cheaper, and that was really what we were trying to test. So Sheila, do you have anything more to add on this one?
No, I think you covered it all with this test, Jim. Let's keep going.
So let's, audience, let us know what you think. I think a lot of times the temptation is to stick with something that you've done for a while. And one of the things that Sheila and I have done is try to test everything we can, always test our assumptions, test our theories, and you know, always with the goal towards driving performance. And with the Astring, you're trying to lift the gross. And with tests like this on production values, you're trying to see what role cost will play in the success or failure of a test. So in this case, we're seeing if that added cost of 4-color drives response. All right, so this is we got 60% voting for the control 4-color, and we got 40% voting for the test. So that's a good split. So let's see what happens. Sheila?
Sure. So this result was particularly interesting to me because I would think, I come from an advertising background as well. So I would think that the visually compelling piece would be the one to generate more income, more open rate. But the 4-color did not win in this case. In this case, the 2-color outer envelope had a higher percent response, had a slightly lower average gift, and the overall return on investment was $3.71 as opposed to $3.52. So the 2-color outer envelope beat the 4-color outer envelope. Now, we did not, in this particular case, we did not track costs separately, but we do know that full color does cost more. So that holds true that the outer envelope, the 2-color won.
Yeah, in this case, as Sheila mentioned, the vendor billed us a flat fee, and so we didn't take that opportunity to measure the correct cost of the 2 components. We know that the four color yellow stock OEs cost more. So if this is interesting, this is where it's good to look at all the different metrics. If that version had a higher percent response, a higher average gift, but the net wasn't where we wanted it because the cost wasn't accurate, we could have rerun the test. But in this case, the gross per letter is higher on the cheaper OE. So if you were to add in the accurate cost, that two color OE, the test would have been an even bigger winner. So this was interesting. This is why you test, because I think a lot of us thought that four color would win.
Right.
All right, so the next test, also an outer envelope. This is with this was the Lent package. We tested the control version having no teaser underneath the photo. And I'll just show you these two versions. And the test did have a teaser. So this is the control. Now there is a teaser to the left there above the address window. Okay, this is the control version. If you look at the test, you see we have a secondary added teaser underneath the image of Mary there. Okay, so again, the control version did not have this secondary teaser. We're attempting to drive response by using this secondary teaser. Sheila, do you have anything to add on this one?
No, just that, well, when the results come in, I'll add my 2 cents. Thanks.
All right, so we're going to ask you to vote. What do you think won? The control with no secondary teaser beneath the picture, or the test with the secondary teaser? This is also a great test, I think, of outer envelopes. The presence of teasers, the use of secondary teasers, the type of language in the teaser. This one obviously is about Lent, and the Ash Wednesday is the beginning of Lent, so it's a deadline that has a lot of importance, a lot of weight. And I think when your deadlines have they're tangible and there's something that means something, they're going to work even better. You know, sometimes you ask for response by kind of an arbitrary date, and sometimes that works. But I've found often when you have a tangible date and it's tied to something the donor can understand, it's going to help. Now, I'm not trying to give away the results here, though. So, okay. Well, you guys all went for the secondary teaser. 100% voted for the secondary teaser. Let's see what happened. Sheila?
Let's pull up this. Why don't we pull up the stats there? You have the results there? There you go. So as you'll see from those stats, the outer envelope that included the teaser, the secondary teaser, enjoyed an increased percent response and an increase in average gift. So like Jim said, the danger of a deadline can really cut off the response curve. And that was an interesting one.
Yeah, and let me just go back for 1 second. I just want to show people who are noting the cost implications here. This is a two-color OE, purple and black. And so you'll see that our secondary teaser is also purple. So it did not contribute to an increase in cost. So right. The cost was the same. But as Sheila mentioned, that additional teaser under the photo drove percent response and average gift. So it's clearly a winner. So again, I think you should always test deadlines, test the interval for deadlines. But in this case, it was a clear winner. Okay, so our final outer envelope test. This is the summer commitment package. This is a test I think a lot of people have considered or tested on their own. This is a window envelope versus a closed face envelope. So our control summer commitment package was a window envelope, and I'm sure everyone on the phone knows that the window envelope itself can usually cost a little more, the envelope itself, than a closed face, and that's because of the window itself. It's an additional element on that envelope. But because the address flies the package through the window, you usually save on the mail shop cost because there's one less match, okay? So in attempting to test this window versus the closed face, we're testing whether or not the increased cost on the closed face additional match is offset by response. So here's the test version, closed face. All the other elements you'll see are identical except for that window. And so I'll ask the audience to let us know what they think. You know, I think a lot of people like closed face envelopes. It feels more personal.
Mhm.
And I personally agree with that. Sometimes you get that closed face envelope and it feels like, oh, this couldn't be mass produced because it's closed face. But I will tell you that the number 10 window, you see everywhere. And the reason you see that everywhere is because it works. But in this particular case, we'll see what happens. So we'll give everyone a couple more seconds here to vote. And the drum roll, please. All right, here we have 75% of the people voting for closed face and 25% voting for the control. So Sheila, let's go ahead and show the results.
Sure. So the closed-faced outer envelope had a higher percent response, as you can see there, and we expected that. However, the closed-faced envelope costs a little bit more, and it had a lower average gift. So in this case, the window won with a 33-cent higher return on investment. But it's also worth knowing that average gift may not be driven by the window envelope. So we'll be retesting this again in the future.
Yeah, and I think, I know that I've sat around the table and talked about tests for years, and someone will say, oh, well, there was one big gift in there. There was a couple big gifts in there. And that's true. I think you have to note that. And in this case, there was not one huge gift. There were several larger gifts. And so I think you have to note it. But I also think you have to let the donors decide, and you have to kind of trust the results. But as Sheila touched on, did the closed face drive down the average gift? Did the window drive it up? That's not necessarily what we were expecting or what you would think, but you also have to trust the result. As Sheila said, this is something we're going to revisit and retest. But an interesting test and one that helps drive performance. All right, now we are moving into the third category of test, and that is interior components. Again, if anyone has any questions on anything we've discussed so far, please submit them, and maybe at this point we'll take them at the end. So we've talked about the outer envelope, we've talked about the astrings, then you have everything else, really, what's inside that package. And so we had a long-standing control, which was the Summer Novena package, and the control reply was 8.5 by 11, and on that reply form, it had a space for intentions. Now with Catholic nonprofits, this is something that is you're used to doing. You ask your donors to send you their prayer intentions. They're remembered at the shrine there in Philadelphia. Typically, we'd have those intentions on the reply. But I will tell you, and this is important, somebody has to scan that intention or copy that intention or somehow separate that intention from the business part of the reply form, which has financial information, credit card information, personal information. So a lot of times we've run into this situation where our clients say, hey, can you help us out and get these intentions off the reply form? It's a very practical piece of feedback from our clients. And so Sheila and I designed this test to test the impact that removing the intentions from the reply would have on the package. So here's the control reply device. You see you have the addressee information, the ask information, and then down below you have this nice big area for the recipient to add their prayer intentions. Okay. Now here's the test reply. You see it's the same except that bottom portion has been cut off. And then we have this separate insert, which is the intentions form. It has that same picture from the control reply, and now it's a small insert, a 3x4 insert with the intentions on the back. So let me just show you that again. The reply with the intentions, you reply without the intentions with a separate form. I'd like to ask everyone to vote on that. What do you think worked best? The control with the intentions on the reply or the test with the intentions as a separate form? All right, here we go. Okay, Interesting result. We have 25% voting for the control with the intentions on the reply. We have 75% voting for the test with these separate intentions. Sheila, I'll ask you to go through these.
So if you look at the results, the version with the reply that had the intentions attached had a slightly lower percent response rate, but the average gift was higher, and this version also had costs less. So the return on investment improvement was 35 cents. So this one won.
Yeah, and this one, this is a cost. This one did have a cost difference. That separate insert costs more. Anytime you have a separate component, your mail shop costs go up. You're printing a separate component, your costs go up. So this one costs about 3 cents more. And as Sheila said, it drove percent response a little bit, but the average gift was not there. And again, this is one where you ask yourself, well, did the test drive average gift? This one, I think there's a case to be made that it did. Because I think there's a school of thought that says when you have someone on that reply and you're asking them to do something, you're saying, please send us your intentions. And when you do, please send us a gift. I feel like there's some focus there. Perhaps when they left the reply to go fill out the prayer intentions, they lost some of that focus. But again, that's my theory. The bottom line is the donors have voted. And in this case, on this package, the intentions on the reply won. All right, so our next test, this is a really neat package that the Central Association Miraculous Medal has done for many years. And they send out a large tabletop altar, and it essentially becomes a place that the donor can worship from home using this tabletop altar. And so, but it's a beautiful altar, but it's an expensive altar. And so one of the things Sheila and I discussed was, hey, how important is the heft and the quality of this altar? Is it the information that's contained on this tabletop altar, or is it this prominent altar itself? So let me walk you through this test. The two inserts look identical, okay? This is the art for the more prominent altar. It's also the art for the lesser altar. It has this beautiful image of the shrine on the front, and then on the back, it has essentially this guide to praying the novena at home, okay? Both of them look exactly like this in terms of what's the color, the information, etc. Okay, but where they're different is when you put them on a table side by side standing up. On the left is our control altar. You can see it's much taller. You can't make it out as well, but it's also a much thicker stock. The one on the right, the test, is what you might consider a brochure or pamphlet thickness. And then laying down, you see again that the control version is much larger than the test version. And this is one for the production geeks among us, of which I count myself. The specs on these are very different. Even though they look similar, they're very different. And again, the altar is the heft of the stock and the size is the biggest driver, okay? So what do you think won? This prominent control tabletop altar they've been sending for years, or the lesser tabletop altar? I will tell you one quick anecdote while you're voting, that we have talked to people who've been with the shrine for many years, and they said that when they go into homes to visit their donors and their members, they've seen this tabletop altar displayed year after year after year. So the donors really like it. That is clear.
They do. I agree with you, Jim. And just to state for the record, Jim and I sit back and we decide what tests to come up with that will help lift our results going forward. But sometimes it's driven by scuttlebutt. I think you'll agree, Jim, from our executive committee or from our Vincentian fathers and brothers, that, do we really need to do this prominent altar? One of our priests was visiting, had a prison ministry and was visiting a prison, and he says, I see them all over the prison cells, but I tend to think that's a good thing. So that was one of the discussions that came up that Jim and I decided, let's test this and see if we can, increase the results some way.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting one. All right, so we have 75% of the people voting for the control, the more prominent tabletop altar, and we have 25% voting for the smaller, lesser tabletop altar. So let's take.
those people that voted for the control, they were on to something, because the control piece had a higher percent response, but it also had a lower average gift, and it costs more than 10%, I think it was, per piece, Jim. So for
Yes.
this, the lesser tabletop altar wins with a return on investment of 35 cents higher.
Yeah, and this is a metric. I haven't talked much about gross per letter, but if you see gross per letter here, the gross per letter is identical. So essentially, they both drove the same revenue, but then when you take into account the cost difference, that's where this lesser tabletop altar wins. It costs almost a little over 10 cents less per piece, and so that's the winner. Now, again, this is something we can revisit, but the donors have spoken. The beautiful, heavy stock of the tabletop altar does not drive enough performance to offset that cost. So I thought this one was really neat.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so our final interior components test and our final test of the day is the Christmas gift package. This is another one I find very interesting. The control package, let me show you this control, had this buck slip in it. Now, every year for this particular package, the association offered a back-end gift for a donation of $100 or more. Okay, so the gift changed year to year, but this insert, this buck slip, always went along with the control package, and it described essentially what you're getting for that gift of $100 or more. Okay, and this year was a medal that was touched to a relic of Our Lady of the Miraculous Medal. Okay, so this was the control. This went along with the package, and so the reply did not have any of that language on it. That was only driven by the buck slip. Okay. Now the test we did was we put that buck slip information on the reply, and you can see there the green line that goes with the package with the donor. It's still attached, but it tells them they can detach it. But this all went in one piece on the test version. Okay. So what do you think won? The control reply with that $100 gift info on a separate buck slip, or do you think it won when we added that gift information onto the reply? This is similar to the intentions test, I think, in that you're trying to consolidate pieces, you're trying to focus them on the reply. Question is, did it perform the same way as the previous test when we put those prayer intentions on the reply? So if you go ahead and vote, we'll reveal the winner. Okay, 100% of you voted for the test reply with the gift information. Let's see what the donors said.
So the donors said the test reply without the buck slip, it had a very similar percent response, but the average gift was lower. So even though the control with the separate buck slip costs slightly more, there was a $3 increase in average gift. So that made this one a winner with a 21 cent per piece higher return on investment.
And this one, I think this reinforces to me why you test.
Mm-hmm.
I would have guessed the test would have won. That follows our testing result from the intentions test, where we added the intentions to the reply. But in this case, that buck slip drove higher average gift. And I think, again, this is a test where you can directly link that average gift to the test, because that insert, remember, was all about gifts of $100 or more. So for whatever reason, this separate buck slip worked better than combining that information on the reply, which, again, I think this is why you test, because you never know. In this case, the control won, and I find it fascinating. So that brings us to an end of our test. If anyone has any questions, be happy to take them. Again, thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedules and in this crazy time we're in right now to join us.
Thank you
Yes,
both.
and I too would like to add, I'm very grateful to be with you. Thank you, Shannon, for providing this forum. We really appreciate it. And one thing I would like to add is it's very important. Jim and I have an excellent relationship, and we keep the lines of communication going constantly. I think I speak to Jim more than I do my own husband, to be honest with you. But it's very, very important to constantly test. And, you know, during these difficult fundraising times, it's very important to keep your mission going. So if you do have a direct mail campaign, our advice to you, I think Jim will agree, to keep it going. You might want to tweak some messaging for these difficult times and maybe soften the ask a little bit, but not too much. It's still a fundraising piece. But I would say keep the mission afloat and know that you're all in our prayers at the Miraculous Medal Shrine.
Yeah, I would just add one thing to that. I totally agree with everything Sheila said. I think one thing we have done with all of our clients, including Sheila, was make sure that any mail we can still affect, meaning it hasn't been sealed and handed off to the post office. If you can get a mention of this situation we're all dealing with into it, I think that's important to try not to come across tone deaf, so to speak. But absolutely, I think we all know we're all stuck at home. Your donors are home. Quite frankly, I think people are lonely. I think they're stressed. I think they want to hear from these nonprofits. They love their nonprofits. That's why they donate to them. So I absolutely concur with Sheila that I think you got to stay in the mail. But again, thank you. And Shannon, I think you mentioned there's a couple questions.
We do have a couple questions, and I couldn't help but think as you were discussing the Tabletop Altar package that, my gosh, if that happened to be in the schedule for right now, that would be such fantastic timing, as so many people are not able to get out to their regular worship services, to be able to you know, for you to be able to facilitate that. So
Right.
I'm not sure if the stars aligned in that way for you, but even anything that's that type of messaging, or with your call programs or your email programs, being able to recognize that different kind of need right now is
Absolutely
so important. So a couple questions. One of them is a two-part question. How do you decide what portion of your budget to be spent on testing every year? And do you make all of the testing plans at the beginning of the year or on a campaign by campaign basis? So two questions in one there.
I'll start, Jim, by we pretty much make the testing decisions on a campaign by campaign basis. You know, and we try to keep costs reduced. Now, we do establish our budget in the beginning of the year, and we try to fit our testing within that budget. But I would say it's safe to say, Jim, wouldn't you agree that we pretty much come up with them on a campaign by campaign basis?
Yes, absolutely. You know, in a cycle of planning, you'll sometimes look back at a result. Like I said, you know, 90 days after a result, you'll note that result, and you'll start incorporating it into your body of knowledge going forward. Sometimes you get back around to that same mail slot, you'll have a different idea for a test though. So we don't set those in stone ahead of time. We develop them kind of as those projects are getting closer to being in the production schedule, because you never know what new ideas you're going to have. You never know what ideas, like Sheila mentioned, are going to be driven by someone internal to the organization. So we always kind of reserve the right to tweak those tests right at the last minute. As far as the budget question, I think it's a really good question. And I would say that practically speaking, you have to work within your budget. You have to do what you can afford. But I would say, as you've seen here today, the value you get in testing, it does two things. It drives the short-term net, as you've seen here, but then you start applying that data to future packages. So really what I'm trying to say is I just can't overestimate the importance of finding budget for tests. But you do have to do it carefully. You know, the Astring Test, they don't cost anything extra. So you can do that today and cost absolutely nothing extra. The teaser test costs nothing extra. So you do have to work within your budget, what's realistic, but you're always going to benefit from the knowledge from these tests. So I highly encourage you to find a budget to do them, whether it's a dramatic test or a small test. Always try to test something.
From the vantage point of your experience and expertise with testing, are you, and we might be getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but are you thinking of curbing or changing your test investment right now while things are just so unusual, more people at home, unknowns with the economy? Do you feel like test results right now will be valid and actionable?
Yeah, I think as long as the volume is high enough to make them statistically valid, I still think you should test. But yes, I do think you should get a little conservative. I firmly believe you should be talking to your donors and mailing your donors and asking your donors, because again, I think your donors love you. Sending money is an expression of love. So don't stop that love. But yeah, you got to be careful. We are heading into an unprecedented time period in our country. And if anyone tells you they know what's going to happen in the next 90 days, they're wrong, because nobody knows. So yeah, I think you got to be careful. I think your test should err, if you're starting out a test, err on the side of those that don't cost anything or those that cost a little bit. I think that makes a lot of sense.
And I would add to that by giving you an example that Jim and I have a mailing that's due to go out very soon. It's for our June Novena of Hope, our Summer Novena of Hope. And in that mailing, we were going to test a case, some work that needed to be done at the shrine, some of our stained glass windows. And so we completely pulled that letter and we changed the copy, and we will not be testing the case. We'll be more using pastoral and compassionate messaging in that letter.
Yeah, and I think, Sheila and her team had really important insight that they didn't want to ask for a big ticket item like a stained glass window, which is an important part of running a shrine. But in this time, it might seem like a disconnect. So I think that was a very smart pivot.
We'll let you know at a later date.
Yeah.
And with the lead time on mail, it's hard to, you really are playing a guessing game. That if anybody can tell you in 90 days, I think if anybody can tell you in 9 days what will be
right.
How much
exactly, yes.
in a week. So
True.
The last question is back to the tabletop altar, clearly an attention grabber. Have you looked at the long-term value of the donors who received the control, the more sturdy one, just because it has maybe longer, it lasts longer?
I think that's a really good question. I will tell you, there's something I didn't show on that test. We actually did a test within those tests, in that we looked at the impact of new donors on the file who had not received the prominent hadn't received any mail from us on that previous year. They were new donors, so they hadn't received the tabletop altar. So we did test within the group. So we still sent half the people the prominent altar and half the lesser, but within those group, we looked differently at those who had received the altar before versus those that hadn't. And so I think this is not quite the same as looking at long-term value year over year, but we did notice that the new donors had a higher response to that prominent altar because they had never seen it before. At least that's my speculation. Versus those who've been on the file, well, they'd gotten it before. So I think that's a very good question. What the life cycle of those donors and the prominence of that altar, that's something we might want to look at. But no, I think a longer term look is something we could look at over time. And I think that's a great question.
Great. Well, I think that taps out all our questions. So I really want to thank both of you so much for being here. And Sheila, you spoke to the great rapport that you and Jim have, and that's really clear.
Yes.
It's a team effort in doing the successful fundraising, both testing and just overall what you're driving every day and every year for your organization. So really appreciate both of you being here. For everybody participating in the polls, thank you very much for being part of the action and the learning today. And please watch your inbox for a recording as soon as Zoom can turn it around for us.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Sheila.
Thank you. Good luck, everyone, and God bless.
Be well. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.